us a little bit about monetization lessons from the downloadable console game world. And he said that, I should say he doesn't know what he's talking about, but I disagree. He knows what he's talking about. I'm looking forward to hearing it. So thanks, Steve.
All right, thanks. So there are like 7 of you, so I think that's maybe 2 slides per person, actually. If you have, we'll be able to answer everybody's questions. So I'm talking about how to make money in downloadable console games. Now, there are a ton of ways to make money in downloadable console games. So what I'm going to do is focus on some that I think are interesting, that have come up recently, that have gotten some attention or have done well, and focus on those a little bit where I can, and then try to convey that information outside of the console game world. Because I know that a lot of the audience here is not necessarily console developers, but I think there are some things that we've learned along the way that can be applied outside of console games. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about a particular aspect of the future of console games that I think everybody will find interesting. And then if I have time, I'm going to jump into some lessons that I specifically learned designing trial experiences for games on Live Arcade. So I started out, I started out 17 years ago making games professionally, and about 15 years ago I was working at a small independent developer, desperately wishing I could be designing and releasing my own console games. And about 7 years ago, I randomly knew the right people at the right time to get involved with Xbox Live Arcade. And I made Apples Colloquy X, which was a launch title on Xbox Live Arcade, and the first downloadable console game that we had made. And this was my introduction to Live Arcade, and it changed my life. And I mean that seriously. Every project we ever did from that point on was at least colored by, if not completely consumed by, a focus on downloadable console games. Over the process of the next 7 years, we made a whole bunch of Live Arcade games. We made a couple of WiiWare games, and we made 1 PSN game. So that's the bulk of our experience with downloadable console games. We've done contract work and a bunch of prototypes and work on different platforms. But we have experienced we did, at least over the last few years, experienced the key players in the downloadable console space. It used to be that to make money with a downloadable console game, basically you can sell the game sight unseen, or you can give the player a trial, let them try it out, see if they like it. This is a classic screen from a trial game here. And that's fine, and it worked. But there's a lot more than that, so I'm going to jump into some interesting possibilities here. One is episodic content. There have been a few games that have tried to do episodic content either as separate release products or as in-game content that you download. The most recent, most exciting example of this actually is Walking Dead, which is very popular, a lot of attention. Their episodic content, they treat it as a season, and these are 5 episodes in a season. Their content is actually released as DLC within the game, which seems to be a better model. They have sold millions of copies of their episodes over multiple platforms, so they seem to be doing really well with this episodic approach to downloadable console content in general, which in this case is a game with a bunch of episodes. Bundles have also been a really interesting approach that some people have had success with, in particular Microsoft, and one of the reasons why I mention it is because of Microsoft's success with Summer of Arcade. They will release 4 or 5 games, and if you buy all of them, then you get free Microsoft points in this case, or in other cases they've actually given extra games, given another game along with these games if you buy all the games, which is a cool way to get attention from one game to spread into other games and help people buy the other games as well. A similar idea that we personally were involved with Microsoft was a cross-promotion among several games. So the idea is not only to promote one game from another game, but also maybe to unlock content in one game if you've bought another game, which I think was pretty cool. So what we did was this Games for the Holidays promotion with Microsoft back when we released A World of Keflings, and it was real content. If you owned Rascals, if you bought Rascals, you would get content in A World of Keflings. And if you bought A World of Keflings, you would get content in Ilo Milo. So it was more than just a character showing up, which happens quite a bit. There are a lot of indie console game developers that share content back and forth because they're nice guys and they like to do that. But there's also this opportunity of saying, if you bought the game, we'll actually unlock new content for you, which is pretty cool. In-game stores, which in the console space is usually called DLC. I think you guys are probably really familiar with this. Every game, retail or downloadable, has DLC basically, but in these days it's a much bigger deal. So for example, Walking Dead, we looked at implemented their episodic content through DLC, which was great. DLC traditionally is split up, at least from my point of view, in peripheral items like avatar pictures, avatar clothing, and actual in-game content. And that in-game content is, I think, some of the most interesting. So for example, Pinball Effects 2 is a game that is free. Pinball Effects 1 was a traditional trial model. Pinball Effects 2 on Xbox Live Arcade is completely free to download and entirely driven by downloadable content. And they have a ton, I think more than 25 different tables that you can download in the game. So the game is free, and then you pay with content. It's not traditional free to play because each of the tables is a trial experience. So it's basically 25 little trial experiences, and you have to buy the table to have the full experience. But they have, this is data I stole from Gamma Sutra, they have sold tons and tons of copies. If you look at the column on the far right, total sales for some of those tables, they've sold hundreds of thousands of copies of some of those individual tables, which is more than many live arcade games have sold ever. The success of one individual table within Pinball Effects is sometimes tremendous, and the whole title itself has done extremely well. So I'm also going to share a little bit of stats from downloadable content that we've done in our games. So the first thing I want to do is compare A Kingdom for Keflings and A World of Keflings. We did map packs and DLC for A Kingdom for Keflings and A World of Keflings. We got about the same adoption rate for full purchasers. So you can see that A Kingdom of Keflings had 700,000 people who bought the full game, and about 12%, 14% of those people bought the DLC. When you have 700,000 people who bought the game, that is a pretty significant number of people buying the DLC. The DLC was definitely profitable for us. A World of Keflings, we had a lot fewer people who bought it, a little bit over 200,000 at this point. These numbers are from July, by the way. And so we just have to do the math and say, well, if we get approximately 10, 15% of the people who bought the game buy the DLC, then we can make this much money according to how much we're charging for it, and it's still worth it, and we still do it. We have found that our DLC has never, paid DLC, real game content, levels or stories or things like that, never goes below 7% of the people who bought the game. So it's a pretty solid, and I'll show you another chart here that shows we've done this a lot. So it's a pretty solid baseline where we can expect to make a certain amount of money for DLC for a game minimum. And then some of them, with games with rabid fans and with better effort on our part, we can actually reach more of the paid audience with our DLC. Even free stuff, not everybody who bought the game is going to get the free stuff, so, but it does pretty well. One thing we found, well, everybody knows this, downloadable content sales fall off significantly over time. There's a certain window, a lot of people say it's 3 months after the launch of a game, where the DLC for a console game will sell very well, and after that point it starts to fall off. And we found that to be the case. It's a little bit harder to see on this chart here, but the big tall numbers are the games where we released the DLC pretty quickly after the game came out or with the game, and the shorter numbers are the ones that came out later. But you can see we've done a lot of different DLC, never below 7% adoption for real, actual game content. Another form of downloadable game content is in-game currency. So you have this in-game store, you buy in-game currency. And this was, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but first I'm going to show you this example, which is Crimson Alliance. Crimson Alliance is another Xbox Live Arcade game that did this really interesting thing, which is they, first of all, you could download the game for free, and it was still not really free to play because you had to choose whether you were going to play one character for 800 Microsoft points, or if you would unlock all 3 characters for 1,200 Microsoft points, which all by itself is really interesting. But Crimson Alliance also did actual in-game currency, which is not super common on Live Arcade yet. And so they combined both of those things, and they got, they had the same discussion that everybody has with their audience, saying you're trying to cheat us by charging us extra money for things that you're trying to let people pay to succeed at the game, and why can't I just play the game? And they had a big argument, but it seems to have done pretty well. So, so Crimson Alliance, great example, right? you can use consumables. I'm sorry, consumables is Microsoft's term. It's in-game currency. You can use in-game currency to support a paid product that's already a trial or a paid download. But it gets really interesting when the in-game currency is your primary source of revenue, and that's essentially the definition of free-to-play games. So let's talk about free-to-play on consoles. And this is the one thing about the future that I really wanted to get at. This morning in the keynote address, Ed Fries said, you basically can't do free-to-play on the existing consoles. Now, I hate to pick on Ed because he was just making this off-the-cuff comment, right? He's wrong. You can. So I'm here to explain that a little bit. So first of all, let's start with the PlayStation 3. There are free-to-play downloadable games right now on the PS3. And I mean real, actual free-to-play and then pay for content or pay with in-game currency for game content. Free Realms is kind of an edge case because there's also the subscription model that you can opt into, and that's kind of interesting. DC Universe Online, as I understand it, is a very classic free-to-play model. Downloadable right now for free on PS3. Dust 514 is the really interesting case that I want to dig into a little bit more. It's a first-person shooter downloadable through PlayStation Network, and it's free to download and play sort of now. It's not available yet, but it's in closed beta, so it's a real product that really exists, but they haven't released it in the store yet. So that's great, right? You'll eventually be able to download this game and play it for free. Oh yeah, here's a screenshot, Dust 514. Ooh, first-person shooter, really cool. This is really interesting, and you can play it. You can wait and download the game and play it for free, which is great. Or you can pay $20 now and play it now. So there are a lot of Rabid fans who are definitely going to take advantage of this offer, but it's totally optional. It really is a free-to-play game. This is just one interesting way that you can approach the game: is you can pay $20, get access to the closed beta, and also get a whole bunch of other stuff that you'll eventually be able to buy in their in-game store. So Dust 514, really interesting case, right? So yes, you can make free-to-play games on consoles right now. But let's talk about the Xbox 360. Microsoft has, the official policy for Microsoft right now is you cannot make a traditional free-to-play game on the Xbox 360. They've taken some interesting steps toward it. Pinball FX2, like we talked about, Crimson Alliance. There are other games where they're free to download games, and there are games with in-game currency or DLC. The technology has been there essentially from the start of the platform. There was always theoretically the possibility to do traditional free-to-play games, modern free-to-play games, which are free to download and derive their primary revenue from in-game store content. So when are they going to do this? Well, there are a lot of people saying that they're doing it right now. So it kind of depends on who you listen to. And I can't speak for Microsoft. I do a lot of work with them, and of course I can't violate NDAs and I can't speak for them. But I think I can pretty confidently tell you that if you have a compelling title that is good enough to be approved for Live Arcade anyway, and you want to talk to them about free-to-play, they will talk to you about it. They'll say, our policy right now officially is no free-to-play, but let's have a conversation and let's talk about it. This is a wave that is crashing down, and I think it's crashing down right now, and Xbox is a little bit behind the PlayStation on this, but it's going to happen. And if you listen to the press, it's happening right now. So we talked about the Xbox 360, and we talked about the PlayStation 3. The PlayStation Vita right now has free-to-play downloadable games. The 3DS has free-to-play games, or free games, and in-game stores. I don't know the official policy. I was trying to get somebody with eShop a friend of mine from the eShop to answer me, but she hasn't answered my email yet to say whether or not officially they support it, but the technology's there. It would definitely be a policy issue with the 3DS. The Wii U has gone on record as saying, yes, we're going to do free-to-play games on the Wii U for sure, and of course they've got a big push toward downloadable. And then obviously the Ouya made a big deal about all of their games will be free to play. Now they're including trial experiences as well, but clearly their plan is to support modern free to play games. So that's a review of the current and upcoming sets of consoles and the fact that, yeah, you actually can develop free to play games for those consoles. So I want to finish with, I think I have plenty of time, right? That's probably 5 minutes. I want to finish with 3 lessons that I learned from making trials. One of the reasons why I want to share this is because I spent the last 7 years of my life studying trial experiences. And every game that we released 6 live arcade games, 2 WiiWare games and a PlayStation Network game. Every game that we did, I tried to make a better trial experience. I think trials are a big deal. I think that the player can have a really positive experience and legitimately decide if they like the game or not. And I put a lot of time into it. And a year or 2 ago, I can see the writing on the wall with free-to-play, and I started to get depressed that all of my effort researching this had been completely wasted. But I thought about it deeper, and I decided that there were actually some things that I had learned from this experience that I think people can apply to other monetization models outside of trial experiences on consoles. So the first one I want to share is showing the value before upselling. A lot of live arcade games will just kind of throw you right into the trial. Live arcade, any demo game, anywhere, any PlayStation Network game, they'll just kind of throw the trial up and say, okay, you've had enough. Do you want to buy the game or not? The problem is I need to know how cool the game is. And they try. They show me a screenshot. This is my game. They show me a screenshot, and maybe it's a little screenshot. Maybe it's a tiny screenshot. And they give me bullet point features that they want to show me. But dang, I want to know what I'm getting into. And not only can you make this screenshot full screen, not only could you make it video, characters talking to you, really sharing what the game is really about, but it can be changing, it can be showing all the different modes. It can also be very context sensitive. If a player tries to go to this mode that you've locked in your trial, and you say, here is that mode in deeper detail, then that can be much more effective. I believe that this is very applicable outside of trial games. For example, Emily Greer from Congregate said that a lot of free-to-play games today just kind of start throwing the coins at you and say, hey, you want to buy some coins, you'll get some stuff, you'll get a tractor, but maybe you've just started playing the game, you have no idea what a tractor is. It's much more effective for the game to say, here's a tractor, it's really cool, it's interesting, maybe some other characters are using it. Hey, if you want that tractor, then here's the way that you get it with in-game currency. So tell the player the value before you try to sell them on it. Another thing I learned, and this is a really big deal, is selling on the upswing. A lot of trial experiences will throw you into a level, and you finish the level, and they say, the level's done, here's your score, that was the trial experience, do you want to buy the game? Well, for one thing, you kind of have closure at that point. You've experienced the game, maybe you're bored, you go do something else. For another thing, you've lost the energy, don't really care anymore. The best trial experiences I have ever had have been when I was about to beat the boss, about to finish the level, really on this energetic high, and then all of a sudden the value is much more apparent to me. One of the best examples I ever saw of this was Limbo on Live Arcade, where they don't even, the upsell message is awesome. It doesn't even say, hey, buy the game. It says, are you going to abandon the boy? Yes or no? Do you really want to abandon him? And so your choice really is this emotional, energetic, I was caught on the upswing kind of a choice. And I believe that this is fairly applicable outside of trial experiences. For example, in modern free-to-play games, people can, developers unfortunately can again get caught up with saying, here's some coins. You could, in the middle of a free-to-play game, say, you finish that level. For the next level, you can have this bonus modifier if you pay for it with coins. Or they could offer me that in the middle of the level. I'm struggling, I'm about to win, whatever. There's any point there that they could offer for me to buy in-game content is more, any point within actual gameplay is more effective than between levels or after gameplay. And the last thing is everything is part of the trial. A lot of developers they build the game first and then they think of the trial experience. And unfortunately what that results in is this experience that's designed for the developers themselves, essentially, and in the middle of the game they're going to pop up this trial, or in the middle of a free-to-play game on Facebook or something, then they're going to start talking to you about coins. But what we learned was that everything the player experiences is part of their trial experience as a first-time player. When they see box art, when they see screenshots, descriptions, in a free-to-play game, when the game pops up and says, hey, can I have permission to spam all your friends forever? Then that's part of their trial experience. And I know a lot of people who say, no, you can't, and I'm done, and that's the end of the trial experience. It's this sort of a hidden, people talk about conversion rates. I get 100,000 users who play this game, and 50,000 of them converted. Well, there's this hidden loss of conversion ahead of that point that people don't even think about sometimes. That is, did they even download the game? And everything you do from packaging to download experience can affect that. For example, there are a lot of modern PC downloadable free-to-play games that you go to the website, you click on a button, you start a download. When the download finishes, it turns out it's just a bootstrapper, and it starts another download. When that download finishes, then it installs the game. You run that, and then it downloads updates. It's this incredible 16-click process to try to get to the actual meat of the game before you even try the trial, and I guarantee you, I and many other people are bailing out on the game. So you have to step back and say, what is the first-time user's experience from start to finish if he hasn't installed anything, and how can I make that experience superior? Here's an example from Cloning Clyde. We said, well, if we're going to write text, let's write it in the character of the game. Let's make it interesting so that before the player is even presented with the option to buy the game, they have been drawn into the character of the game a little bit. That is part of the trial experience. My point basically is make the first-time player have a first-class experience, and don't think about the game only from your developer point of view, that you already know everything about the game and you're kind of counting it from the moment it launched. That is it for my lessons from the trial experience. So, plenty of time for questions. I would be happy to answer questions about anything about my live arcade titles, about console development in general, about the future of consoles, or anything at all. Go.
How optimistic are you around the future of console downloads for this next generation? And be interested to hear any thoughts or insights you had on whether self-publishing is going to be easier and whether free-to-play is going to be available from the outset.
So the question is, how optimistic am I about downloadable console games in general, and is the experience going to be easier, and will free-to-play be available from the onset? So let me start with the last question. That's a pretty fair question, because technically right now, I couldn't tomorrow ship a free-to-play Xbox Live Arcade game, but I could be I could be working on something with Microsoft right now with respect to free-to-play. I think that, in my opinion, free-to-play is the new wave. Everyone I talk to outside and inside of hardware of the console holders say, absolutely, we're all doing free-to-play. We all know it. We're just trying to pick the right time to do it. So free-to-play will absolutely be available, and I think it will be available to everyone. Anyone who's making a game, that will be an option for them. Will it be, how optimistic am I? Like, if I look at it from a potential market point of view, I think there's some bright stars in the future. Like Ouya obviously is a very console-centric, a very developer-centric console, and that's a big focus of theirs. Is that going to be a big market? We don't know, but clearly they're trying to make that a positive experience for the developers. The Wii U, right off the bat, they're really pushing downloadable experiences, and people from Nintendo are working with small developers right now to make downloadable games for the Wii U. So I'm pretty dang optimistic about the Wii U as an experience. We'll see how well it does as a market. I can't say a whole lot about future Xbox potential, except to say that I'm a little pessimistic about the experience with Microsoft right now. Microsoft has helped make my company what it is today, so I hate to pick on them. And with any huge company, there are astoundingly positive experiences and horrible, I want to slit my wrists experiences, and everything in between. And right now, some of the bad experiences are that Live Arcade itself is buried within the dash, and all the Live Arcade developers are complaining about this, and have been for a year, and it's not getting fixed. So I can't say I'm optimistic about that. If they do the same approach, Microsoft's approach right now with the console, unfortunately, is first of all very advertising heavy. There's a ton of ads on the dash, and second of all, they're trying to make the universal set-top box that you can use to watch TV and sports and whatever. And so they just kind of compress down the space available for games, and Live Arcade being a subset of that gets compressed even smaller. And there's no sign that they're going to change that policy anytime soon. So we'll see how that goes. Not super optimistic about the downloadable future with Xbox specifically. So we'll see. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Other questions? Yep, go.
So, how do you make your game like Outpost Colokies stand out more than like regular Xbox console games? Like, if you can't do brick store sales, how do you promote it? How do you get more people to go after it?
The question is, how do you promote a good game, and how do you get people to go after it? How do you promote it compared to other games available on the console? That is a fantastic question, and that's really the whole problem with Live Arcade right now, to be blunt. It's very difficult to promote. There's a very little space available to promote the game. And part of the answer is to build a relationship with Microsoft and get them to believe in your game. The more they believe in the game, the more you have evangelists at the Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo, whoever you're working with, then the more they're going to promote the game. And in the end, their promotion is 50 times more valuable than any promotion you could ever buy for yourself. And that includes dashboard space, it includes web promotion, it includes promotion at conferences. If you're good enough to be in one of these curated console marketplaces, then you're good enough to be talking to them and saying, hey, help me promote this game. It's a little bit of a tough proposition, but it's something that you can do. Another option is to work with a publisher. Big publishers like EA have much, much bigger advertising pockets, and they think about promotion from the start. It's a little harder for an indie developer to think about that. So that's another option, is to go with somebody who has more money. Another option is to buy your own ads. It is possible, but it's really expensive, tens of thousands of dollars minimum to buy advertising space. And what I'm talking about is on the console, because we have found that promoting a game outside of the console is essentially ineffective. Promoting the game in the dashboard makes all the difference in the world. And if a game launches, which unfortunately we've experienced, if a game launches without promotion on a console, then it's pretty much dead and it's not going anywhere. So no one will ever see it, no one cares about it, your downloads will be horrible. You could have a 20% conversion rate and you won't really make a ton of money on the game. So promotion is crucial. So those are some ways to approach it. There are some of these ideas that I talked about here are really about promotion, like cross-game promotion, that kind of thing. But in the end, one of the single most successful things we ever did as a studio was open our minds to possibilities with Microsoft. A Kingdom for Keflings, for example, it's probably not very well known that we made that game without avatars. We built the whole game. It was at beta. We were ready to submit to CERT, and it had no avatars in it. And Microsoft said, hey, we want you to look at this new avatar thing we're developing. And we said, okay, yeah, we'll look at it. It doesn't seem like it'll fit, because we've got our own character style, but we'll look at it. So they gave us some assets. We looked at this avatar thing. We did a mock-up of the game with an avatar in our game. And I went back to Microsoft to talk about it, and in the meantime, my account manager said, yeah, you know, we decided it wouldn't work very well either. And I said, no, wait, look at the screenshot. And she looked at the screenshot and said, holy cow, that looks fantastic. Of course we want to do that. So here was this out-of-the-blue opportunity that we initially didn't think would work, and it ended up making all the difference in the world for that game. And there are 5, 6, 7 examples of that in our relationship with Microsoft. If you're a good developer, they like working with you, you're good to work with, then they'll say, what about this, what about that? And you can say no, but if you just open your mind, then all of a sudden those opportunities will really blow the doors open for promotion. So why did we sell 700,000 copies of A World of Keflings? Partly because it's a good game. People try the game. It converts very well. The conversion rate is good. Partly because it supports avatars, and they're a huge freaking deal, and Microsoft promoted the crap out of that game.
Yeah, I remember it being one of the first incorporations of avatars into the game. It was really amazing.
Yep, yeah, it was one of the first Avatar games, so all of those things helped, but we've done several very similar deals with Microsoft where they say, what do you think about this crazy, we're going to sell eggplants with hats, and we say, okay, yeah, let's talk about it. And it could turn into something, and if it turns into something, it always means promotion, which is fantastic. So,
Thank you.
other questions? Yep, go.
We're at a transition. What platforms are you guys targeting from here?
That's a good question. So I hope Microsoft never watches this talk. Actually, there's somebody from Microsoft in the audience. Live Arcade is really scary right now. I mean, when I launch a game, when I spend $1 million developing a game and it falls on because I can't get any promotion for it, then that is a huge risk, and it terrifies me, and we're not anxious to just go running off that same cliff again. So and WiiWare is nowhere, and this will have to be my last question. So WiiWare is nowhere, and PlayStation Network was not as cool, not as positive as we expected. We got kind of caught up in the network trouble they had. I am optimistic about the Wii U, so that's something that we're aggressively looking into. I'm a huge fan of Windows 8. I don't know if I can even justify it. I was sitting around saying, what platform am I going to support? I'm not really excited about any of my options right now. What do I do? And along came Windows 8, and I said, yep, that's it. That's what I'm going to put my energy into. So we're taking Windows 8 very seriously. And of course, we're doing mobile and web games just like everybody. It's hard to ignore, even though when I started the company, I said, we're going to make the greatest console games ever. I would really like to see Ouya be something, because that would help me stay in the console world and not abandon it entirely. Okay, I'm done. But thanks very much.